Here with me now, as promised, is Senator Adam Schiff of California. Senator, it's good to see you. There's quite a bit going on right now, so I want to talk to you about all of it. I just want to start with the polls because they're pretty consistent, and Trump is underwater on a number of issues. My theory, I just talked through this, is that part of that is his misread of what he called a mandate and just this massive overreach in a number of areas. But how do you see it?
I think that's exactly right. He's claiming that he had this huge mandate, which of course he didn't have. But more than that, they keep saying that he's just following through on his promises. But in fact, he's not. His main promise was he was going to improve the economy. He was going to bring prices down. Of course, everything he's done has been contradictory to that. The tariff wars have just driven inflationary pressures even higher. American families are struggling even more. So really the central promise he has reneged on. And now he's doing all these other things that he never promised during the campaign. In fact, to the degree that they were written about during the campaign in Project 2025, he tried to run away and disavow them. So he doesn't have a mandate to do what he's doing, and I think it's reflected in the already enormous voter dissatisfaction in his first 100 days.
Yeah, I mean, people are just starting to feel the tariffs. They're going to feel them a lot more, which I imagine is going to be worse for him. We'll see what he does. One of the numbers, or some of the sets of numbers that were very interesting to me, were around immigration. And one of the ones that stuck out to me was the approval rating for his handling of the Kilmer Abrego Garcia case, which is very interesting because a lot of people, I feel like there was some commentary saying we shouldn't talk about it or it shouldn't be front and center. But only 31% of people have approved of his handling of that, which is, I think, very telling. What's interesting about him, and I mentioned this too, though, is that when things like that are clear in the polling, he still goes a step farther. I mean, he arrested a judge, Judge Hannah Duggan, in Milwaukee this week. He had arrested a former judge in New Mexico this week. It feels a little bit like he's still escalating on the immigration front, even when the polling is telling you something different. But what are you seeing about his actions out there? Yeah,
I was struck by that on the polling, too. There were a couple of things that leapt out at me. One was just how poor his numbers were in the handling of that case, because you're right. There was some saying this is a distraction, we shouldn't go there. But this is, to me, the tip of the spear in terms of his violation of the rule of law, basically ignoring a court order to facilitate the return of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, who was, by their own admission, deported in error. And so the fact that his numbers are so terrible on that means, you know, the public is understanding the case, finds it important, doesn't agree with what the president is doing. And that case, I think, and others, including now we're learning about him deporting, or the administration deporting, a 4-year-old with a stage 4 cancer without giving the family a chance to keep that kid here, U.S. citizen, get the necessary treatment. The other number that really stood out to me, though, was by a 2-to-1 margin, 50 to 21, people think that he has made their economic circumstances worse rather than better. Those are really damning numbers. But even more broadly on immigration, what concerns me gravely, because now they're using courthouses as a fulcrum for immigration policy. They're using the IRS to enforce immigration policy. They're taking people's appointments with immigration to turn around and deport them, even when people go to get their citizenship, take their citizenship oath. What that's going to mean is fewer undocumented people willing to go to court. And most of the time when undocumented people go to court, they're not the defendant. They're the victim or they're the witness. So they're not going to participate in the justice system. Why file your taxes if they're going to use your taxes against you to deport you? So it's going to mean a lot of people aren't going to be paying their taxes that would normally be paying taxes. People aren't going to show up for their immigration appointments because they'll fear they're going to be used to just grab them instead of whatever process they're in. So it's going to mean millions of people going deeper into the shadows, which is not in the interest of law enforcement or tax collection or society. So in the bigger picture, I think it's a real mistake.
I've never thought about it exactly that way. It's interesting how it deters people from participating in aspects of the system, paying taxes, and again, going to courts when they need to be defended themselves. The arrest of the judge in Wisconsin, again, not isolated, felt jarring. I know that we should be jarred by too many things these days. Do you think, I mean, you've done the studying of Donald Trump for a long time. Is that to scare people, to deter judges from doing what their job is? What do you think the motivation is behind that?
I think it is.
Yeah.
In a normal, rational world, you would have immigration authorities work with a courthouse and decide, okay, how do we work together, or how do we at least not interfere with what each other are doing? You wouldn't have the kind of confrontation and arrest that we saw. But the administration relishes this. They relish the opportunity to go after judges. They relish the opportunity to try to intimidate and shock people. They talk, just gleefully about impeaching judges they disagree with. So it is part of a broader assault on the rule of law, a broader effort to intimidate. They're intimidating the universities. They're intimidating the law firms. They're intimidating corporations, forcing them to come hat in hand begging for exemptions from tariffs. And now they're trying to intimidate the judiciary as well.
No question. I want to ask you, I mean, you were the lead impeachment manager, of course, as we all know, for Trump's first impeachment trial. We all followed it very closely. You were on the January 6th committee. I know this is maybe not your favorite topic, but one of your colleagues, Senator John Ossoff, said at a town hall that Donald Trump should be impeached, basically saying his conduct this term has, quote, already exceeded any prior standard for impeachment. I mean, you know the legal justification. Obviously, a lot of what he's done is horrific. But what do you think? Has it exceeded that bar?
Well, I really think we should not be talking about impeachment. We should keep our sole focus on protecting our institutions, the rule of law, and winning the midterms. What we should be really trying to do is not just make the case against Donald Trump right now in terms of the midterms and retaking the House and Senate, but also making the case for ourselves. I don't think it's enough, even though he's doing this terrible job, to rely on presidential self-destruction. The thing that poll did not indicate is, what are the Democrats' numbers?
Yes.
And so I think we need to be focused on our own numbers as well, and making the case for how we would be better stewards of the economy, how we would not engage in this reckless tariff policy. Seeing today the Treasury Secretary say their tariff strategy is strategic uncertainty. What the hell is that?
What is that? I don't know.
With tariffs, you want to be certain.
Yeah.
You want to have some certainty, some predictability. Uncertainty is the worst. So, but I would love to see Democrats out there advancing our own big ideas. For me, it would be a housing boom. I'd love to see, in the same way Eisenhower built highways and roadways, the Democratic Party be the party of building housing, massive new amounts of housing to bring housing costs down and address homelessness and expand Medicare, ideas like this that I think we need to be out there raising our own profile and positives with the public.
I think a lot of people are happy to hear that, and that's one of the issues that probably hasn't gotten enough attention. We're going to take a very quick break. Senator Adam Schiff is sticking around. I do have to ask you about one of the most dangerous people in Trump world, who lots of people have never heard of. Some people have heard of him. You know a lot about him. I think you know who I'm talking about. We'll do that when we come back after the break. So there are 93 U.S. attorney offices across the country, and they are all important. But one of the most important is the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Washington, D.C. And right now, that very important office is occupied by Donald Trump's handpicked guy, named Ed Martin. He has zero experience as a prosecutor, but he was also a longtime Republican operative and a MAGA true believer. And so, sure, U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., why not? It's 2025 in the Trump administration, everyone. And when Ed Martin got this job, he got right to work. He demoted a number of lawyers who worked on the January 6th cases to entry-level positions. He tried to freeze the bank assets of a Biden administration grant initiative despite not having evidence of a crime. That of the criminal division in his office decided to resign rather than go along with all this. And just this week, Ed Martin threatened the nonprofit status of Wikipedia, accusing it of propaganda. And those accusations it's all pretty rich. I mean, given the recent revelation that from 2016 to 2024, Ed Martin was a frequent guest for actual Russian propaganda channels RT and Sputnik. But Ed Martin is one of those guys where surprises like that should not be surprising. I mean, in 2020, he helped organize Stop the Steal protests to push Trump's election lies. He was actually in Washington on January 6th, and he took this picture that I'm showing you, right outside the Capitol, and compared the scene to Mardi Gras. Later, Martin served as a defense attorney and advocate for January 6th defendants. And one of the rioters that he praised was this man. Yes, that guy you can see right there, who photographed himself posing as Adolf Hitler, Timothy Hale Cuccinelli. The Justice Department that Martin now works for said in court documents that this man is an avowed white supremacist and Nazi sympathizer. And yet, just last summer, during an event supporting the January 6 rioters at Trump's Bedminster property, Martin gave him an award and called him an amazing man and an amazing leader. Well, this week, as Martin awaits possible Senate confirmation, he apologized for his association with this guy and claimed he didn't know the full extent of this very problematic history. That is very hard to believe. And now this claim is, of course, being undercut by Martin's own videos and podcasts, which the Washington Post dug up this week. And in some of those videos, Ed Martin says Hale Cuccinelli was slurred and smeared by anti-Semitism allegations. He even went as far as to call him a friend.
And so Tim Hale is an extraordinary guy. I've gotten to know him really well. I'd say we're friends over the last few years, and especially in the last month since he's been out of jail, since he's been out of prison. Gotten to see him work, see his writings, all these kinds of things. An extraordinary guy.
Again, I mean, the Justice Department describes the guy Ed Martin was just talking about in that clip there as an avowed white supremacist and Nazi sympathizer. Ed Martin's interim appointment ends on May 20th. He still needs to be confirmed by the Senate. And it's not hard to see why Senator Adam Schiff has been trying his very best to slow that process down. Senator Adam Schiff is still with me here at the table. I wanted to talk about him because I think there's so much going on right now. There's so many nominations. I know people have heard of him, but you have spent a lot of time helping educate people on him. I just went through some of the things about Ed Martin, but I was saying to you during the break, I couldn't even cover all of it. What did I miss, and why are you so concerned as a former prosecutor yourself about someone like him being in this particular position?
I think a lot of people are familiar, of course, with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and all the destructive actions of the department. But this guy is, in many ways, the tip of the spear. He is the acting U.S. attorney in arguably one of the most important U.S. attorney's offices in the country, because in the District of Columbia, he is responsible not just for prosecuting federal crimes, as all U.S. attorneys are, but also in prosecuting what would normally be state crimes. So he has kind of double duty in this very large U.S. attorney's office. He was picked, like a lot of Trump people are picked, because he was a stop-the-steal lawyer. So if you are the most aggressive in the big lie, then you are at the very top of Donald Trump's list for appointment for something. So this guy with no prosecutorial experience, whose only experience is defending other January 6 criminals, is picked to be the top law enforcement officer in the District of Columbia, or at least the top federal prosecutor there. And what characterizes his service? Well, he becomes acting U.S. attorney. He moves to dismiss the case against some of his own January 6 clients. And to represent people on both sides of the same prosecution is a patent violation of all the ethics of the profession. So, not surprisingly, there's a complaint against him with the Bar Association. But he has also tried to use the Justice Department as a cudgel to go after the president's enemies, or to threaten prosecution of his pet causes. And so in one case, this environmental fund established by the Inflation Reduction Act that funds sustainable energy projects, he doesn't want that money to go out. The administration doesn't want that money to go out. And so he tells a prosecutor in his office, write to the bank that's holding this money and say either they or this fund are under criminal investigation, because we don't want those grants to go out as they're supposed to by law. And the prosecutor says, I can't do that. There's no evidence to support a criminal investigation. She refuses. She's fired or forced out. And you have this whole course of unethical conduct. You have him shilling for Nazi admirers and white supremacists. You have him lying to the committee, failing to disclose all kinds of appearances on Russian propaganda. So in very many ways, characteristic Trump appointment, dangerous person who should never get confirmed for anything. Dick Durbin is leading the effort in the Judiciary Committee to stop this nomination. I've also put a hold on him. And I hope we can. I think the Republicans on the committee, too, the more they learn about him, the more shocked they are. Whether they'll actually vote that way remains to be seen.
Yeah, that is, I mean, it's an education as you learn. And for me, too, as you read more and more about individuals like him, putting a hold means you can slow down the process because they will have to go through more steps of the process. I guess it's also, if Republicans are concerned, they can stop it earlier than that. Let me ask you, there was this great Politico headline. I thought it was great. There was a piece about you where you said, the headline was how Adam Schiff is bringing House vibes to the Senate, which I think I know what the House is a little scrappier, a little bit more aggressive typically than the Senate, that the Senate often prides themselves on we're always going to find ways to work together in a bipartisan manner. And there are ways to do that. Some of your colleagues in the Senate disagree and don't want the House vibes, as they've said, brought to the Senate. What do you make of that? And why do you think that, as I read it, a more aggressive approach to opposing Donald Trump as opposed to doing things how they've always been done is important right now?
Well, I like to think that our freshman class, which is largely House members, are bringing the best of the House to the Senate. That is a willingness to fight and fight hard and make the case in no uncertain terms, both against this president and the dangerous things he's doing. I don't want to bring the kind of vile performance art that you see of the Marjorie Taylor Greens and whatever. I don't want to bring that to the Senate. And I also want to preserve the ability to work together with others. My first bill is a bipartisan bill with a Republican from Montana. But our class is determined not to be wallflowers. We're going to be out there fighting to protect our democracy and the rule of law. And we're willing to fight in new and tough ways to make that happen. So in that respect, I think we add a lot of value to the Senate.
Some might call it House vibes. House vibes to the Senate doesn't sound like it's the worst thing. Senator Adam Schiff, thank you so much for being here today. I know we covered the gamut of lots of topics. Thank you for staying longer as well. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
Okay.